We welcome on Ryan Lavarnway, a big league catcher appearing in 10 seasons, most notably with the Boston Red Sox, and is now the Triple-A catcher for the Miami Marlins in Jacksonville. Ryan, how you doing? And you got to show us your setup too, because you're set up pretty nicely in the press box right now.
What's going on, bud? I'm in the press box. Today's the last game before the All-Star break is over here in Triple-A. I'm up at the press box at our stadium. We got to practice right after this.
Gorgeous. How's the season going so far down in Jacksonville? I know you've been bumping around between a couple of teams, but I just saw a bomb on your Twitter too. You're hitting the ball pretty hard. It seems like everything's going pretty well.
Yeah, I'm having a great time. This is my 15th summer playing baseball. I can't believe they still pay me to do this, but I'm still pretty good. I think I still have a lot of fun doing it. I started the season with AAA Toledo of Detroit's organization. And right after my daughter was born, she was 9 days old. She was actually on top of a Tigers jersey taking our newborn photos when I got called and I got traded to the Marlins. So it's been a little bit of a transition, but we're here and I like the team we're on. I'm playing pretty well.
Yeah, and we're talking with Ryan Lavarnway, catcher for the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp. Ryan, I want to take you all the way back to when you were drafted. I want to talk about your career. I got to unpack your brain about some of the new minor league rules that especially affect catchers, because you've been catching now for over a decade, as well as just some stuff about the All-Star game, because we have a lot of new catchers in the All-Star game, and also about the futures game, a lot of good prospects in there. So you were drafted by the Red Sox in the 6th round. I just got to know, what was it like for your name to be called? And then also on top of that, what was your first welcome to the bigs moment? Those are some of my favorite stories.
Yeah. So back in 2008, when I was drafted, they did actually 6 rounds on the first day. I was the last pick of the first day because the Red Sox had won the World Series the year before. So they had the last pick. So I remember on all the recaps and on the websites, they were like, who was the first pick that year? No, Byron Buxton or whatever. It was Byron Buxton to Ryan Lavarnway, whoever it was. I got listed because I was the last pick of the first day, but it was pretty cool. When I called the next day, I was supposed to call Theo Epstein to get to know him or welcome myself to the organization. And the phone rang and it was defending champion Boston Red Sox. I was like, this is surreal. I can't believe I'm with such an historic organization. And then my first call up, you asked for my welcome to the big story. My first call up, I was told you're going to fly to Kansas City. Big Papi's banged up. Kevin Youkilis is banged up. We don't know how either one of them is going to respond when they wake up in the morning. So you're going to fly there, meet the team. You're either going to start in the game or you're going to fly back to AAA. So don't tell anyone. Don't tell your family yet. Just get on a plane and go. And it was kind of wild. When I landed, I got to baggage claim. They're like, hey, we're going to put Uke on the DL, but you're going to DH for Big Papi tonight. So come to the field. You're in the lineup.
So I want to ask you about your draft party, but first, did Big Papi give you any pointers? At least you get into the dugout and you're the guy who's now going to DH for one of the greatest DHs of all time. Did he give you any pointers before going up to bat?
No, Big Papi was kind of a handle his own business kind of guy. If you wanted to talk about an approach or what should I look for against this pitcher, he was your guy, because not only was he physically talented, he was a hitting genius.
Yeah.
One time you never saw him in the dugout because he was either in the clubhouse on his phone, reading a magazine during the game. Big Papi got to do the game a little bit different than other
whatever
people.
He wanted to do.
There was a rookie he was facing for the first time. He'd never seen this guy. He was watching video in the tunnel right next to the dugout. And he came up, he was leading off. He goes, hey guys, this is what's going to happen. This guy's going to get ahead of me with 2 sliders. Then he's going to throw one in the dirt, thinks I'm going to chase it. I'm not. He's going to throw a heater up. I'm not going to lay off that either. And then on the 2-2 count, I'm going to hit a hanging slider over the monster opposite field. And we're watching this at bat play out. And it happened exactly like he said it was going to. Never faced the guy in his life. He just knew exactly what was going to happen.
He just was a little bit ahead because, we talk about prospects all the time and everyone has the physical tools, right? But it's really about the mental approach. I mean, Yogi Berra said it best that baseball is 90% mental and the other half is physical. But the reason I wanted to ask you about the draft party was I was just watching the Derek Jeter documentary. And then, of course, we were watching the 2022 MLB draft. And watching Jeter get drafted 6 overall, he says that he didn't even know who the first 5 picks were and that he got the call and his heart sank because he thought he was going to go in the first 5 picks. Now, fast forward to 2022, these guys like Drew Jones is wearing an enormous chain. They look like celebrities already. Can you take us back to your draft party? Maybe were you wearing sweatpants or were you wearing a big chain or somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, it's a very different experience now for these guys. So I had led the country in batting average and slugging percentage in Division One. So I was looking at going in the top, 3 rounds maybe.
Yeah.
And then I broke my wrist right before the draft. So I ended up dropping a little bit. We didn't really know what was going to happen. I had been talking to all 30 teams. A lot of the teams said, "Hey, we'll see you next year when you're a senior." And a few teams had basically said, we're still going to see if we can pick you up. So the third round came and went. The fourth round came and went. I was watching it on the internet ticker by myself in my dad's home office. There was no draft party. There was no chains, no suits. And then you get a phone call like, "Hey, if we take you in the next round, will you sign?" And, they're not really supposed to do that. I think pretty much everyone does because they want to make sure they get their guy or they don't waste a pick, especially if you're a high school guy or a college junior where you have a little leverage to negotiate. A lot of those contracts are negotiated before they actually pick you to make sure they're going to get you. So they called, they said, "Hey, if we draft you, will you sign?" And then by the time the 6th round came around, I was just relieved that I got picked because I had got it through my head that I was going in the draft. I wasn't prepared to go back to college the next year emotionally at that point. So it was really relief was the feeling I felt.
And speaking of draft prospects, you were able to have the opportunity to talk to some of the prospects in the futures game. In the futures game, I was just at the futures game. There were some guys who I just was totally impressed by. And of course, it's cool to see them for an inning, but at the end of the day, it's an exhibition. Like this guy can look so great here because maybe he's ticking up in velocity a little bit because he's got adrenaline running through his veins. I think that's why I want to unpack your mind, because talking to these guys, you can get a better clue of who they truly are rather than just watching an inning. Who were some of the futures game prospects that you were most impressed by and that you spoke with?
And there's a few guys that I've played against this season in AAA. Mets catcher Francisco Alvarez, he's number 2 on MLB Pipeline's top 100. This dude is the truth.
Yeah.
You know what? Even when we played against him right before the All-Star break, right before he left for the futures game, I'm watching this guy catch, and we'll see what happens when the automated strike zone comes into play. But this guy catches it as well as anybody in the big leagues. He moves around behind the plate. You can just see the actions. He's got it. And then I think he was actually cold against us with the bat. But I talked to their manager, Kevin Bowles. He was my manager 100 years ago. And he's telling me that this guy's the truth on both sides of the ball. So Francisco Alvarez, I got a lot of, I would bet on him if I had to bet, if I was allowed to bet, which I'm not.
Yes. Just one question about Francisco Alvarez too, because a lot of people now with the new updates, as some of these guys have now graduated, for example, like Riley Green was the number 1 prospect, and then it was Francisco Alvarez. Riley Green's now playing center field. So it seems like Francisco Alvarez really is that number 1 catcher. And you should see some of the comment sections that we're dealing with now from Mets fans who are just clamoring for this guy to be up in the big leagues, especially because the Mets have had their struggles at catcher this year with James McCann not truly being the hitter that they thought he was coming over from the White Sox, but he's still not a bad player, but just not, the big 4-year contract that maybe they paid for. Still a good defender, but I digress. Thomas Nido, a lot of these guys. Do you think after hearing about him, talking to him, listening to what coaches have to say, do you think it's crazy to promote him now? Or do you think that maybe the Mets trading for Wilson Contreras at the deadline, a rental catcher like that, would make more sense, give him some more time to really develop? Or are you looking at a big league catcher right now?
So the thing with the catcher position, and this is why I'm still valuable as a 35-year-old, or not quite 35, is it's not just the physical tools, right? James McCann has a lot more value than just what he brings with the bat and the glove. He's going out there and working with the best pitchers in the world in Max Scherzer, Jacob deGrom, the rest of that staff. It's not just how he catches the ball. It's what is he doing physically, non-verbally communicating, the pitch calling, the preparation, knowing the hitters, knowing your pitchers and being able to work with them, garner their respect. So Francisco Alvarez, whether he is 100 times better physically or not, that is the question you have to ask yourself. Is you as a Mets having the best team they've had in a long time and a playoff bound team that's trying to win the World Series right now, is how are your pitching staff, your older guys, your $40 million best pitchers in the world, gonna like pitching to a rookie Are they gonna lead him like a deer through the woods and like call pitches from the mound in some capacity, which you can do if you know how to do it? Or would they be frustrated if he doesn't know what pitch they want to throw, if he doesn't, read the batter's swings as well as Nito or McCann? Because I've heard nothing but good things about how Nito relates to his pitchers too. It's not just about what he's doing physically. There's so much more value there from the catcher position.
And a guy like Francisco Alvarez too, we just saw a glimpse of him catching Jacob deGrom down there in the minor leagues too. So at least we saw a little spotlight into what the future might hold. But I kind of agree with you. And maybe you didn't even say that you don't think that he could, but I have been on the basis of, I think a Wilson Contreras, get a power bat right now, a guy who can definitely hit lefties, which the Mets haven't been doing lately. That makes sense. Give him some more time to mature, because you could push him up too quickly and it could ruin his confidence. You don't want to do that with a guy who has such a high pedigree in the minors. Who are some of the other prospects that you were really impressed with?
Well, we talked about Riley Green, and I played with him before I got traded over to the Marlins organization when he came through Toledo and in spring training before he broke his foot. This is a guy that's kind of atypical for a top prospect because he doesn't have any single skill that wows you, that stands out and jumps off the page. He's not an 80 power. He's not an 80 speed. He's not an 80 arm. But the longer you watch him play, you're like, wow, he's just a solid all around baseball player. He doesn't look like he's running that fast, but then you clock him and you're like, how fast was that to first base? And you watch him in the outfield. He catches every ball in the outfield with two hands, which you don't see, but he catches everything. And he might not be an 80 hit tool, but he puts together a really good at bat every single time. So Riley Green, the more I got to watch him, the more impressed I was. Guys that were in the futures game, Orioles infielder Gunnar Henderson. We just played him. He killed us. They came down here to Jacksonville, and I feel like we couldn't get him out for a week. We tried pitching him all sorts of different ways. And then a guy that I had in spring training also with the Tigers was Dylan Dingler, catcher. He's gonna be really good too.
You like Dylan Dingler a lot, especially coming from a catcher. What do you like most about Dingler?
I think that he goes about the game the right way. It's exactly the intangibles that we were just talking about.
Yeah.
He handles himself well. He gains respect from everyone by the way he walks around, but he does have the tools that jump off the page. He's got the bazooka cannon for an arm. He's got the pop off the bat that you watch him take BP and you're like, holy moly. Like,
yeah,
you just hit that over the scoreboard.
And I just have another question about Riley Green too, because it's pretty timely right now that another Tigers prospect and Spencer Torkelson just got sent down. And when we're talking about tools across the board, Spencer Torkelson probably has a higher graded power tool than a Riley Green, maybe even a more exciting prospect when you look at a tool set. But at the end of the day, Spencer Torkelson struggled when he got called up and is now back in AAA. Not to say that he won't be great. Of course he could be great because it's still early in his career and he got up in the cold. He's a warm weather guy, even in college too. Like maybe the cold in Comerica just didn't do him right. Couldn't get his swing, couldn't get the timing. That's okay. He'll go back to the minor leagues and he'll come back up and be a star again. But a guy with Riley Green, it's so hard for a guy to falter when he has such a well-rounded game. Who are some other minor leaguers that you feel have great sticking power in baseball? Not because they have the 80 power tool, not because they can run faster than the wind, but who are the guys who are the 55, 60 guys across the board that you've come across in the minors?
Well, Spencer Torkelson is going to be just fine.
Oh yeah, he'll be fine.
Talk about a high character guy. I was in spring training with him and I was talking with AJ Hinch, and AJ was like, as a 15-year player, AJ would have conversations with me about like, hey, do you want to manage? Do you want to GM maybe later in your career? And we would talk about the other side of the game, the managerial side. And he was like, yeah, with Riley and with Torkelson, I'm trying to break them in old school. They went on every single road trip in spring training. They played in every single game. But then again, these guys have played very little minor league baseball. We talked about it before we started recording here. You had the COVID year, then you had the shortened season last year. And then all of a sudden, this guy that was a first round pick is in the big leagues just like that. He's played very little minor league baseball. He went up on a team that was playing in the cold in Detroit. The team had a lot of struggles offensively as a group, and hitting is contagious. If Javi Baez is cold, the rest of the lineup might be cold also. And if Javi Baez is lighting the world on fire, it's going to make everyone else around him better. I don't think anyone is worried about Spencer Torkelson still being a star.
Yeah, not even a little bit. So I have to ask though, who are some of those staying power? Because when we're ranking prospects, and to your point as well, when we were talking pre-record, that it's so hard to rank some of these guys that were drafted in 2019 that only got a cup of coffee in the bigs. 2020, they lose the entire season, and then they have to come back and immediately be a prospect. I mentioned Andrew Vaughn as a guy like that, one of the most MLB ready bats that we've seen in the draft, got picked 3rd overall out of Cal. But then he, now he's got to play left field, even though he's a first baseman and he's barely played any games. And now finally we're starting to see the bat play. Some of these guys just need a little bit longer, but that's why I'm so curious, because Riley Green seems like almost an anomaly at some point. Like some of these 21-year-old, 22-year-olds who just stick in the bigs and it doesn't even matter. They could have everything stacked against them, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Are there any other guys that you've come across that are like that you think once they get to the bigs, they ain't coming down for no reason?
Yeah, it's hard to say when you don't see a guy over and over, but being on the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp now, we've got some big time power bats here in the Marlins system coming up. Gerard Encarnacion hits the ball as hard as anyone I've ever seen. He got a brief call up for a second, hit an opposite field grand slam in Miami, which is a huge field in his first at bat. He's here, and it feels like once every other day he's hitting a ball. You're like, holy crap. You got JJ Bleday running around the outfield, catches everything in the air, big time pop, hits it to all fields. And then a guy you may or may not have heard of is Charles LeBlanc, who the Marlins got from the Texas system. He's just an all-around solid player. Maybe not the 80 grade tools, but you could put him at third base, you put him in the outfield. He hits every day. He's got some pop, puts a good at bat together, but look out for him too.
And just about staying power, I mean, Gerard Encarnacion, he just had a base hit off Jacob deGrom when I feel like Jacob deGrom is just out here bullying single A, double A, triple A hitters. And he was the guy who got the base hit off him. So there's definitely some staying power with him. And I'm sure Marlins fans, because we got a lot of them who listen to this podcast, are going to be excited to hear. Just for those Marlins fans, because we have a big base of ours, any pitchers that you've caught in the Marlins system that you say, wow, they have good stuff, because I'm pretty sure that could be easy to say, because this is one of the best pitching systems as well as in the big leagues that we have in baseball.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys. It feels like we have a staff here where we're in the game every single day. Even if we don't score a lot of runs, we have a chance to come back because there's the bats there. The bats are going to come around. The pitching staff has been awesome. You just had Max Meyer get called up. I was basically assigned to be his personal catcher for the last month since I got here. And he's really come a long way since I saw him at the alternate site in 2020 during the COVID year, right after he got drafted. There's a couple other pitchers. I don't want to single anybody out because I know my teammates are going to watch this, but there's some good arms here. You can trust that when they get called up, they're going to help the team.
I got to say, and we're going to move on to some minor league topics too, but I just saw Yuri Perez at the Futures game, and I know it's just one inning and it's hard to say that, but I've been watching video on this guy too. This 19-year-old kid looks like an alien. That's all I got to say. Like, not from this planet. How are you 6'8" repeating your mechanics like that at 99 miles an hour with a disappearing breaking ball? I hate to say this, but I just get so excited about some of these players. I'm like, that's just Sandy. I mean, there he is, 19-year-old. He looks unbelievable. Have you seen him up close?
I haven't yet.
He's going to freak you out. He freaked me out when I saw him in person. He is so freaking good. And I'm so excited to see Max Meyer too. I know I already had a cup of coffee in the bigs, but he's going to have some staying power because he's got the fastball. He's got the slider. He's going to be a good pitcher. Let's talk about some of the big minor league topics, because we're speaking with Ryan Lavarnway, who's catcher for the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp in AAA for the Miami Marlins. I got to ask you about a lot of these rules, because a lot of these rules affect catching specifically. Yeah. And I want to start with robot umpires, because we've seen that. I think it's only going to start taking place in 2024. At least I think that was the earliest I saw that alert. I don't know how true that is. Maybe you can correct me. Maybe it will be up by next season, but it seems like 2024 is the year that they're pegging for that.
For that to come to the majors?
Yeah, for them to come to the majors. First, I just got to ask, how has it been in the minors? Have you experienced it? What's it been like?
I'm going to tell you, I haven't played a game with it as the umpire yet, because I was in the Eastern Division of the International League with Toledo for the first half of the season so far. And in the International League, they're only doing it in the Charlotte Stadium only. So I haven't been there yet. But I get the umpires that are like, hey, I haven't called the game in 2 weeks because I've been only doing games where there's the robo ump. So I got to make sure I still know where the strike zone is from the umpire perspective. And the hitters talk about, we want the strikes to be strikes and the balls to be balls, right? That's, at the end of the day, I think that's what everyone wants. Nobody's worried about whether there's going to be an advantage one way or the other. I think you're going to have catchers that don't have the hit tool, that the receiving tool is their main moneymaker. You're gonna see a shift in what is valued in the catcher position, which has already happened once during my career, right? When I got drafted in 2008, you couldn't measure receiving metrics like you can now. This was before StatCast, before Hawkeye. So you just had to pass the eye test. Does it look good when you catch it? In the last 15 years, that's been totally revolutionized to receiving is the most important thing that a catcher does. And if you steal 3 strikes a game, that's more valuable than the offense that Mike Trout puts out on the field. Yeah. That's how they measure it. So some of these guys that have made entire careers out of receiving the ball, I think you're going to see a shift away from that. But then you might have the catcher position turn into an offensive position again. We'll see.
So here's my view on it. I've been kind of pounding the desk. If I have to watch a baseball game and it's the bottom of the 5th inning and it's a 2-1 ball game and it's a 3-1 count, and I have the umpire calling New York in order to see whether it's a ball or strike, I'm going to freak out. And I'm obsessed with baseball. I'm turning the television off. That cannot happen. I want robot umpires if it is 100% seamless. So take your time with it, right? Make sure that it's perfect. I'm perfectly fine with it coming into the game if it's absolutely perfect. But then again, that will take away from a lot of catchers. For example, Jose Trevino, who I'm going to ask you about later when we talk about the All-Star stuff, has now had an All-Star type season because he's a guy who the framing metrics would say that he's the best framer in baseball, but you can watch it in real time. And it's hard to find a catcher where you really can see him stealing the low strike with incredible effectiveness. It's the way he handles a pitching staff, to your point about how important that is incredible. And that's why he deserved to be an all-star, regardless of his offensive performance, even though he was an above average offensive catcher. So I also have a question just for you as the baseball player too. How good are these catching metrics? Like defensive runs saved, all these savant metrics. Yeah. Do you find them accurate? Because I bet you see some metrics on Savant or on Fangraphs, and then you watch the game with all your years of experience, knowing catching like the back of your hand. Do you think it matches up really well, or do you still think it's a little gimmicky?
Both. I think it's a very valuable stat, and I think it's really important because if you steal that strike in a 3-1 count or a 3-2 count, that batter doesn't walk to first base. Then you don't even have to throw him out if he tries to steal second base. And then if you give up a weak hit or a seeing eye single where that guy scores, you've eliminated that from even becoming a possibility. So that strike that you steal that changes the at bat from, in a 1-1 count, from a 2-1 to a 1-2 count where the batting average is 30% different, 300 points different, that really goes a long way. And a lot of times when you steal the strike, you don't know how much you just saved because the game, we're living in a continuum where this is the future now versus if that had been a ball, I can tell you how many times it's been a 3-2 count and maybe the pitcher misses his spot. I'm set up on the outside corner. I reach across to try to steal it. And I know it was a strike. We have the Hawkeye up in the dugout. We could tell that on the K zone immediately. We can tell in the dugout that it should have been a strike. We yell at the umpire. It doesn't matter. It's a ball. That guy goes to first. The next guy hits a double or a homer on the first pitch. It feels like every time when you don't get that strike. So I think it's very, very valuable. That being said, because I change teams every year and I've played for 13 organizations now, I can tell you for a fact that every team measures it differently in their internal scoring system of how they value players, who they sign. Every team is measuring that stat differently.
So for the fan who's living in Philadelphia, for the fan who's living in New York that can't watch West Coast baseball, maybe the game starts at 10 o'clock and they aren't able to watch Joey Bart of the Giants catch or Will Smith of the Dodgers, maybe even Cal Raleigh over there in Seattle. What are some metrics that you would say that are available to the public that we as fans should be looking at to try our best to evaluate a catcher?
I think strikes above average.
On Baseball Savant.
Yeah, strikes above average. Because again, they kind of have decided that if you can steal 3 strikes above average, that's the equivalent of a run.
Wow.
So just add that to the team, that guy's RBI total, basically. Like if a guy drives in 50 runs, but he stole 150 strikes. That guy's a 100 RBI player, basically, in the run differential, because you have to score more runs than you allow. So it's the same difference.
So, and I feel like you might have already answered this question earlier in one of your answers, but when robot umpires eventually come into baseball, how do you view the catching position changing? I know that you mentioned that it might just be more offensively focused, because a guy like Salvador Perez, by the numbers, he's the worst framer in baseball, but he also kind of hits 48 home runs. So he's still pretty valuable, and he's still also, the way he commands a pitching staff is also incredibly valuable. He's also a good blocker, and he's also got a great arm. So just basing him just off framing, even though framing and receiving the ball is the most important thing, how do you view the catching position changing once we do have robot umpires? Like, will Jose Trevino become not as important to a baseball team?
Yeah, I think you're going to see the physical attributes that you can measure are going to go back to what they were 15 years ago of you need to block every single ball, not let anything by you, and throw dudes out and then hit, right? Because those are the only things that are going to matter physically again. I think the game's going to start going in the direction where you're going to start seeing a few stolen bases again. So you're going to want to throw guys out, but keeping the ball in front is going to be number one. And then the relationships that you're able to build with pitchers and game calling, that's something that all different teams, again, are trying to build a stat for right now, but doesn't exist yet. That where you have the heat charts, the hot, cold zones for each hitter. And I know this was how the Tigers were trying to measure it. How often do you put a target or call a pitch that is in the batter's hot zone versus cold zone and the pitcher's hot zone versus cold zone? Because now they have the heat maps that line up this pitcher's repertoire versus this hitter's, how they face. So that they have those blended heat maps. Every team has a version of this. And I know when I was with the Reds in 2019, they were trying to come up with a stat of how you call a game. And they're trying to find an objective measure of that, which is such a hard thing to do, but everyone's trying to do it.
Everyone is trying to do it. And a guy who I feel has always done a really good job, even though he's never been much of a hitter, but there's a reason that one of the best teams in baseball keeps him around. Martin Maldonado seems to have a really good grasp of his pitching staff with the young guys over there like Luis Castillo, Christian Javier, Framber Valdez. It seems that Martin Maldonado could not get a hit during the season and they would still keep him behind home plate. So that's a guy who I just feel like has those intangibles regardless if he's hitting or not, but actually the hard hit rate is up. So maybe we're even looking at that.
How about Austin Hedges in Cleveland?
Exactly. And
he does
Austin
the
Hedges
metrics.
Yeah, the receiving metrics for Hedges seem to be unreal. Is he a guy who some young, maybe they're trying to be catchers one day, maybe some 13, 14-year-olds, that's a guy who they should model their game after defensively?
What I would watch when you watch Hedges is his little movements, not necessarily just how he catches the ball, just how his one knee stance adjusts from when he's giving a target when the pitcher is set, and then he goes into his action stance on a knee once he sees whether the runner is stealing or not. But his preparation, his nonverbal communication with the pitcher. If you go to a game, watch how he is always locked in on the pitcher and they're talking. When the hitter steps out of the box and is doing his practice swing, they're talking with their eyes.
Yeah.
And Hedges is so smart that he has a binder on every umpire, whether each umpire likes you to stick it or to move it. And when they call more strikes, whether they call more on the outside or the inside, high, low, this guy is next level in his mind about catching.
So phenomenal to hear, especially from a guy like Ryan Lavarnway, who's been catching now for 15 seasons. Let's talk about the pitch clock, because that also is going to affect catchers and pitchers. And we were able to interview Tucker Davidson, who's a left-handed pitcher in AAA for the Braves right now, who even started Game 5 in the World Series. And he doesn't love it, but that's not to say that he said that it won't be good moving forward. And just for anyone curious, the pitch clock now in the minor leagues, and Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, it's 14 seconds from pitcher to catcher with no runners on, and it's 19 seconds with a runner on base. I've only heard positive things from everybody but pitchers. I've heard a lot from position players that the game is really moving faster. Can you fill in the holes where I missed on the pitch clock? And can you talk to your experiences of how you liked it so far? And really, is it moving the game quicker?
Yeah, so it's not just what you said. It's 14 seconds from the time the pitcher catches it in the circle to the time he has to make a move towards home plate. So he either has to break his set to move towards home plate or he has to start his windup. Additionally, the hitter has to be in the box looking at the pitcher at 9. And that's the hard part for a hitter. For me, last year with the pitch clock, if you hit a foul ball, there was no clock for the next pitch, because especially with the game today, people are taking big swings.
Yeah.
And a big swing takes the wind out of you.
Yep.
So if you take a big swing, you have 5 seconds to be ready for the next pitch. And if you take 2 big swings in a row, you're probably going to be out of breath. You have 5 seconds to get ready for the next pitch. So to me, I wish they would put the foul balls, cut the clock back into the game. But it does make the game much, much faster. And I was the guy that needed the pitch clock because I play slow. So I'm the guy they made it for, but I appreciate it, especially when I'm catching. I think it gives the defense an advantage. So I would be careful if they were trying to add more offense back into the game of rushing the hitters.
Because you don't think that it's really rushing the pitchers. You think it's more rushing the hitters.
There are some pitchers that it rushes. The guys that come set like.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking about your Red Sox guys. I mean, Sawamura takes an hour in between pitches.
Yeah,
I'm a Yankees fan.
Back in the day. Love him to death. He was an amazing pitcher, but it took 5 hours every time he pitched.
I mean, a Yankees Red Sox game normally will last 4 hours. We got Sunday Night Baseball going into midnight every single time it's Yankees Red Sox on Sunday Night Baseball. As a general baseball fan, though, I've never had a problem with the game going that long. I mean, I just love watching baseball. It could go 4 hours, it could go 5 hours. I'm still going to watch, but I also do understand that we need it for other fans just coming into the game. So have you noticed that? Yeah.
Let me tell you, as a person that has spent my entire life loving baseball and plays it every single day, this pitch clock is it, dude.
Yeah.
We play games in 2 hours and 4 minutes.
Wow.
We played a doubleheader with a 30-minute break. It was 7-inning games, but we played a doubleheader with a 30-minute break in between in under 4 hours. And just
That's
the fact,
crazy.
just because you love the game, you love the action, you want to see pitches, you want to see swings, you want to see balls put in play. After playing with the pitch clock this whole season, I watch Major League Baseball and I'm like, oh my God,
Really?
play.
Yeah.
It changes. You're like, this can be better.
And it has been better. So that's making me seem like this really is kind of the future.
Yeah. I think the kinks need to be worked out of, like, if you hit a foul ball and you need a breather, like you shouldn't have to rush back into the box and be out of breath. Or if your contact fogs up, like right now, the pitcher gets 1 timeout, the hitter gets 1 timeout per at bat. The pitcher's only allowed to pick off twice. If you pick off a 3rd time and he's safe, it's a balk. So that's going to change the game in a weird way of, like, runners are going to be stealing, they're going to be trying to time, whatever. Like if your contact fogs up, you should be able to call time. But it really, really makes the game more enjoyable to watch and be a part of.
And I'm a big fan of stolen bases in general. So I'm all for that kind of strategy there, because we've even seen that starting to take place in the major leagues. I mean, the Yankees, they're a different team now. So you could say, just because, they have some quicker guys now than they maybe did last year. But at the end of the day, they have as many stolen bases by the All-Star break as they did in all of 2021. And that's widely affecting baseball. And I feel like those types of strategies start in the minor leagues and then are now moving forward into the big leagues. I want to ask you, what are some rules that maybe you've thought of in your head over the time playing in minor league baseball and in Major League Baseball that you want implemented?
Oh, man.
Put your GM hat on.
I've kind of been a baseball purist for the most part. Like, even when they're talking about banning the shift or making a 45-degree pie cut where you have to be on each side of it, I think, how do you go backwards? Like, if the statistics tell you we could play defense better if we shift, how do you not let a team do that? So I'm more of a purist. I believe the game should only be moving forward. But if you want to talk like fun, silly rules, like maybe you should be able to throw your glove up and hit a ball if it's a bomb, or if there's a fan wearing the right uniform that catches it, they're out. I don't know.
That's actually electric. If you have a fan of the jersey and they're able to catch it, that's an out, or at least maybe a foul ball.
Yeah, I love what the Savannah Bananas are doing. I think it's making baseball fun again.
It is making baseball fun again. And a guy, in my opinion, who isn't making baseball as fun is Mr. Rob Manfred, the commissioner of baseball. And you don't have to say it, but I'm going to say it. He's making baseball a little bit less fun. At least he did it during the lockout. And he came out with a quote that really upset me. And I know it upset a lot of people in the minor leagues. We saw it all over Twitter, and we just saw it all over the baseball world. His comments on when asked about minor leaguers not being paid a livable wage, didn't even answer it. He said, I kind of reject, and this is in quotes, I kind of reject the premise of the question that minor league players are not paid a livable wage. What was your reaction, and what was the reaction around the clubhouse with something like that?
We've been on the All-Star break since he made that comment, so I don't really know what the group reaction is going to be, but realistically, it's part of what minor league baseball has always been about, right? Guys grind, guys struggle. It's part of like the brotherhood. It sucks. Realistically, I had a AAA coach tell me one time that the low pay was another way of weeding guys out. That if they couldn't handle it, or if they couldn't afford it, it's silly, but that's the system that most guys have come up in. So if they can make the game better for different guys, if the goal is ultimately to have the best talent in the major leagues, then paying them below the minimum wage should not be a method of weeding guys out, right? We want to have the best players make it to the majors. We want to have the most competitive game in the world. So make it a system where that you can have the best players play.
Seems very easy. I hope he understands the message, because we need it, and we need minor leaguers to get paid. Sleep in a bed. How about not on a couch in a farm in Biloxi, Mississippi?
Or in your car.
Yeah, in your car. I mean, I've heard stories like that countless times. But let's end with the major leagues. I saw on your Twitter that you loved watching Jose Trevino mic'd up with Nestor Cortes Jr. Just tell me a little bit about that and how cool that was to watch from your perspective, being a big league catcher now for over a decade.
Yeah, that was cool. Nestor I played with when I was with the Yankees in 2019 when he was on his way up. I really, really enjoy that, because I know that's part of what I do best is work with the pitcher on calling pitches. In any situation, in any count with any hitter, there's always more than one option that could be the right pitch, right? We could go heater down and away. We can go cutter up and in, change up down and away. They all serve a similar purpose based on how the hitter reacted to the last pitch, or based on what the pitcher is throwing well that day. And just getting to witness, like, I thought it was a little tough when the broadcasters were trying to talk to Nestor while he's pitching. I'm like, how's this guy supposed to focus right now? But when you had the like, hey, what do you want to go with right here? Let's go cutter up and in, or let's go cutter back door. I thought that was phenomenal television, and I hope that we can see more of that.
Me too. So thank you so much, Ryan, for hopping on the Just Baseball show. Anything you got to plug before we say goodbye?
Not now, man. I enjoy this. Let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely. We got to just unpack your brain about catching, because I was a catcher in high school, but there's a reason that you're catching and I'm not. So I got to unpack your brain and hear more about what you got to say. So this is Ryan Lavarnway. His Twitter will be in the episode description as well. Thanks again for joining us, Ryan.
All right. Thank you.